Welcome to our public safety webinar for local board secretaries. We're going to talk about duties and responsibilities of a local board secretary and give you some tips on how this can be an easier job for you to manage all the things you're working on. This morning, the previous seminar was board members and making sure we're established properly and compliant with the law. Local board secretaries are an interesting position because they're appointed by the board, and that's who they are. They're sometimes from human resources. They may be just an employee that's working there. We want to advise the local board secretary of why they are necessary and explain the duties and responsibilities of a local board during this next part of the seminar. We want to discuss some of the best practices and roles that we've found around the state to make sure the secretary has an easier job as well. So with that in mind, who is the local board secretary? The definition first by law, and the need for a local board secretary, because each board secretary is our key contact with public safety to disseminate all this information we've discussed so far today. By statute, the local board secretary shall adopt the bylaws as we talked about, and the board shall elect a secretary, one of whom shall be a member of the local board, but not necessarily. And this secretary has the bulk of the responsibility to put the agenda together, make sure the retirements are done with their human resource group, and be able to make sure the meeting's running properly. Now, some of you are secretaries are in the seminar today, some are on the webinar, and we want to make sure all of your questions are answered before you leave today. So with that said, why does a secretary need? Because you have to administer all of the affairs of the system and make provisions that are in for public safety or for Corp. The secretary is responsible to ensure the actions and decisions of the local board are carried out accordingly. For example, you may have a disability claim and the board may direct you to find an IME for that doctor, a doctor to do that IME, and then you'd move forward and pursue that based off of what your direction might be. All administrative tasks associated with the responsibilities are usually completed by the local board secretary. How many times do you see a board chairman filling out the application for disability? Usually not. It's usually the local board secretary. What does the local board secretary do? Let's talk about some of those duties because we have a lot of secretaries with us today. They act as a liaison between the system and the local board. So if we send you communications to the local board secretary, what should you do? The first thing, forward that to each local board member. Then you're covered. That's okay to do that type of communication. Assist the board in communications to their members regarding to their issues. If the board directs you to say, we've denied an application, you better get right on the stick right there and send a certified letter to say your application has been denied. We're not going to make a payment to you. Okay? Responsible for preparing and keeping all records of the meeting. We only want copies of the minutes, signed minutes or draft minutes. You should keep a file at your office for your retention purposes and keep that at your location. Assist the members with any benefit-related questions. That's the biggest responsibility because they're always coming to you asking you questions. The best place to find the answers is where? The website right now, because we put everything out there of what their benefits are, summary of benefits, all that information's there. The retirement paperwork has to go through the local board secretary. So if an active member comes in, you need to be able to say, I can do a normal retirement, I can do a disability retirement, active, whether it's job related or non-job related as we talked about, or a survivor benefit, a guardian benefit, a death benefit, or a drop benefit. All of these are on the spreadsheets that we looked at on the website. So the best thing for you to do is go out and practice using these spreadsheets right now, then you know how the process works. And the instruction manual goes through each one of those individually. If you're staying connected to the system, most interaction between public safety or Corp and the employer are handled by the local board secretary. If a member is eligible, how do we find out? Usually the application comes in, you vote on it in the board, and it'll now end up on this demographic file we were talking about through the employer payroll cycle, and that's how we determine the eligibility of that member. The questions or credit services or transfers the members. we do any buybacks or anything like that, that they're transferring from one system to the other, we normally notify the member that he's made that choice and send it to the local board secretary. You should be getting communication about that as well. You should be able to answer any questions on calculated benefits. And we're going to look at the local board portal, and you should be able to pull up a member at any time and find out what his high 3 year is through the local board portal. That is something you can do that should mimic or reflect what's in the members only account as well. So you should be able to calculate benefits. Issues with complicated members or completing members' benefit paperwork. You should have all the tax forms signed, all the beneficiary forms signed. All of that should be packaged together, presented to the local board, and they make that determination. Then you mail it to the office with what? The minutes within 20 days. Then the member's going to get paid during that time cycle. If that doesn't happen, guess who calls the office? The member? The member, and says, hey, where's my benefit? We're like, we never heard of you. We don't want to do that. We would then communicate to the local board secretary and ask, why hasn't this member been helped? Okay? Communicating with the members. Traditionally, the local board secretary is the person to communicate on behalf of the minutes of the meeting. The annual member statements have now been put out on the website in the members only account. So if somebody comes to you and says, Neil, where's my statement? How much money do I have on account? What would you say? Go to the members only website, look up your login, and you'll be able to determine exactly how much is on file. Okay? Statute changes that affect the plan. All of that's on the website now. Local board decisions, local board elections, all of the things that are happening within the local board. The secretary is usually the one that would put that process together and communicate to us. And you know where that's on the website now. You can just fill out the form, send it in, let us know who's new and who's not. Local board meetings. In conjunction with the local board meeting, you develop the agenda. You have to ensure the meeting notices are posted in accordance with the open meeting law. And we've mentioned that's 24 hours in advance. You have to be able to understand the application of the open meeting laws to the local board meetings. In other words, you can't just be talking about anything in these meetings, because then you would be sued if it doesn't have to do with the agenda. You'd record and prepare all meeting minutes. So that's pretty straightforward. That's a big job for a secretary, isn't it? In addition to everything else you're doing. But guess who gets to do it? The local board secretary. You're like, I didn't sign up for this, right? Most members look to their local boards for answers about service purchases, calculating retirement benefits, benefit options for drop, normal retirement, whatever they're trying to do. Don't send them to our office because we can't help them. They have to go through the local board secretary, because these inquiries are handled by the secretary, and we just kind of review what you sent in and make the payment. So if you have any questions at this point from the webinar.
Don, can individual board members have direct contact with the board secretary about issues such as hiring legal counsel, previous board decisions, etc.?
Yes, they can have individual contact, but not collective contact. But it's best to have all those on the agenda. If they want to put something on the agenda, then the whole board can make those determinations. Any other questions? All right. Let's talk about some best practices at this point. How to establish consistency and efficiency. Because right now the local boards are set up and a secretary is responsible for a lot of this information. Create templates for correspondence. Number one thing you can do. Have a file for just local board information. If you have a pre-existing notice, just make a template and say, hey, we know about your pre-existing condition. We're notated in our minutes. Inform the member. Send it certified mail. Disability retirement decisions. You can actually create a template and use that to say, you've been approved, you've been denied of this disability on this date, the board has made this determination. Let the member know. Make a template for it so you're not recreating the wheel. Local board minutes and notices. That should be just a standard template that you put in, fill in, and you use it every time. Make sure the date of the meeting is there. Obviously the board members, a roll call should be done, and you should have the location of the meeting there and who it's represented, that employer group that you're doing the minutes for. Any agenda should be the same thing. This, like, here's an example. This letter is to notify that you've received your application for, blah, the date, and the statute, the number of days you've been notified by telephone or regular mail. Here's a document to say we've contacted you. Just something along those lines. All right, another thing we want to talk about is best practices. A lot of people are confused by this because if you have a complete retirement packet, it's received by public safety on the 10th of the month, which includes the minutes of the meeting. Guess what happened? We have a happy member. He's going to get paid. If it doesn't follow this rule, we cannot make the payment because they have from the 10th to about we'll say the 18th to process all the retirements for that month, get them in the database, clear it with the bank, and then make payment at the end of the month. That's why we have the cutoff of the 10th of the month. So another best practice we believe is to create retention procedures for all minute meetings, all members filed, active or inactive, and keep a filing cabinet with that information in that file.
Don,
Question?
as far as retaining documents is concerned, you're talking about an awful lot of paper documents. Are you recommending any backup of that?
For your system, some systems or local boards just scan it, and that's a retention policy. Depends on what your retention policy based off your employer group is and how long you keep those documents. That's your decision. Yeah, it's a lot of paperwork for especially the new hires. But you should have a medical, file and a normal new hire file so they're not intermixed for every employee you have. So nobody can snoop through his file for medical records. If you can, and you are a local board secretary only, you can sign up for the local board portal. And we saw that on the website where it's right at the top. It's not need, if you're a board member, you don't need to. It's just designed for the local board secretary to help you with the calculations and be able to put the information together for the member. So at PSPRS.com, local board portal, just the secretary needs to sign up. Have you used it before? What do you think?
It's way better than the
Before, yeah. We've tried to make this as easy. And as we develop the programs, we'll have more information out there on the local board portal as the year unfolds. So be sure. It's easier. Okay, good. We're glad to hear that it's easier to use the local board portal than it ever has been. And we'll make improvements on that as the year progresses. Another best practice is ask other local boards for tips. I loved it at break time, you're kind of visiting with each other. Get to know each other if you're in the room or on the webinar. Find out a sister city that's doing the same type of thing and discuss with each other what's going on. Ask them questions and advice. The tools and resources, as we talked about before, is on the website. And the training section we're going to look at next. And frequently asked questions are out on the website, the training schedule, and the local board newsletters. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and we have the retirement instruction manuals. I hope everybody's been in those. We talked about that earlier. And the spreadsheets we looked at earlier, those are all designed to help the local board secretary do a better job. So the resources, as we talked about for the members handbook, are both for public safety and corp because they're a little bit different. The members only website, if you haven't been to those, you need to be there. All right, well, again, we've got our contact information. Happy to respond to any emails, any information that you've presented to us so far. And again, you can contact LaDon Toger for any questions for active members, contributing members, and Bonnie for retired members. We have one more presentation we'd like to bring up at this point and talk a little bit about other things that we can help you as local boards and local board secretaries. Any questions before we move to the next presentation? All right, Robert, Paul. Okay, at this point, we'd like to talk a little bit about the letters, the minutes, and the forms for local board secretaries, and then go through this process. We want to talk about the various types of written correspondence that you might encounter, a couple of do's and don'ts that a local board secretary may run into, and some time constraints that we've discussed up to this point. The local board creates many different types of correspondence. If you don't know how to do a meeting notice, I want to talk to you afterwards. If you don't know how to do an agenda, I'm happy to show you what the agendas look like, what your meeting minutes should look like, your disability determinations, and the pre-existing notices. The one thing we always look at is in the meeting minutes is, did the local board make a motion to say, here's the guy's name, he's leaving for a reason of disability, you don't have to say the disability, because of the medical evidence provided in the IME, we've made a determination to accept, approve or deny this effective this date. And you can put the benefit amount in. That's a nice motion for a disability, because it's documented in the minutes. Didn't just say, oh, Joe gets a disability because we like him, or whatever. We've seen some minutes that go, approved for disability. Well, why'd you make the decision? We need to know why you make the decision in a disability determination in that situation. So a meeting notice can be simply as this follow format, with an agenda or without an agenda. Remember to follow the open meeting laws. As we've mentioned earlier, you could have the name of the agency at the top, name, date, and location. If you put that right at the beginning on your template, all your other meeting notices will be just the same. You call the meeting to order, approved, executive session, new memberships, consideration of disabilities, deferred, all of those things we just talked about are in the agenda format, and it follows the same consistent pattern going forward. And the minutes should reflect the same thing. You should have the date, time, minutes, who actually is attending. When you do a roll call, just say not everybody's present. You should say Joe is here, Brett is here, whoever might be attending. All should be listed, because we need to know that they are board members making those decisions if we ever had to look back at the records. Do indicate all items on the board intends to take action on, because we need to know the actionable items as we read the minutes. Do ensure that if you're going into executive session, you give a general description of the matters to be considered, properly listed on the agenda as an executive session item. Okay? Do have agendas according to the open meeting law requirements. And on our website, we have an open meeting law discussion with our attorney. It goes through all of the open meeting laws if you need to review that. Do not use generic terms such as new business or other matters unless items specifically are identified, and do not take action on any item in any meeting unless it's been on the agenda for that meeting. We do get minutes occasionally to say, oh, we approved this disability, sorry it didn't get on the agenda. Not going to work. We would be audited on that, and we'd have to reflect that, and you would be compliant at that time. The minutes, all meeting minutes and decisions need to be on record, and here's some examples of some things you could remember. The meeting minutes should include a general description of matters discussed or considered, right? It should include a description of the legal actions taken, including names of members affected by the action, especially on a disability. And action items must include the name of the official making the motion, and everybody should be speaking clearly, like, Dave made the motion and Don seconded it, and it's been approved after the vote. I'm sure that's pretty clear to everybody, but I want to make sure. A copy of the minutes should be received within 20 days. They should be sent by certified mail based off the law, and they are usually the draft minutes, because you're not going to have approved minutes within 20 days of the meeting. Okay?
But the approved minutes need to go up later then, right?
Yes, you send the approved minutes as soon as they come in with the next draft minutes.
Right.
That's how the process works. So this is a lengthy process to have a standardized forms for each step and as they're completed. Initial letter to the application, notice to the employee should be first thing out the door. Notice of recipient of an appointment for an IME should be sent out also. If you've said we have all the medical records requested, notate that in the minutes, because that's why you're making that decision. If you've requested an IME to appoint a doctor, that should be very clear in the minutes of the meeting as well. Don't just say, oh, go see a doctor. No, the local board secretary has to help get that arranged based off of what the determination of the board is. If you have a notice to the employee on local board meetings when the application is discussed or decided, always notice the employee, no matter what happens. You're always safe and will never get sued that way. And also give them the notice of the decision. All right? Any questions about this so far? Question?
This question is kind of out there, but if you're considering a disability retirement and it's based on an underlying work-related injury, and that injury was litigated through workers' compensation to a final result, and part of that process included investigation done by the state fund, is it here in Arizona?
Yeah.
And so there are perhaps films or an investigative report. Is that evidence admissible for consideration by the pension board?
Absolutely, yes. As long as the member puts out, as you're filling out the application, he should list that I had workers' comp. This is the doctor I saw, this is the things that are there. All of that can be then presented to the board if the employer has agreed that that's part of his medical records. It should all be documented, yes. Would you send the IME to that guy that did the workers' comp? No.
But would you send the film that you have that, in any fair evaluation of the film, does not reflect the disability claimed? This is in the workers' comp proceeding. Would you send that film to the IME in the pension board proceeding?
That would be a board decision.
Okay, but it is permissible.
Oh, yeah, you can send whatever medical evidence you've collected to the doctor for the IME.
Okay.
It helps the medical doctor, the IME, do a fair evaluation. If you don't send him everything, then he's not getting everything. So upon the decision, the member that accepts the pre-existing condition, you should notify the member. We've already talked about this, but this helps the member know that it's on file, that he cannot make a disability claim. Very clear. All right, here's an example of a pre-existing letter. You address the person, the dear officer, or whatever it might be. Public safety knows about your pre-existing condition based off the date and the type of pre-existing condition. You can put in his personal file that he's had a knee injury. The doctor's recommended that you may not have a disability because of that, and everybody on the board. So this is a form letter, as we talked about, a template that you could have, and this makes your best practices a lot easier just to pull this up, fill it out, send it out if it's approved by the board. Okay? Another example. Other documents and forms to consider. You may want to look at notifying the surviving spouse or guardian or child benefits. That's a great template to create, very simple to do. Especially a surviving spouse. Usually what happens, the surviving spouse sees that public safety has sent them a check. They call our office. The first thing we do is establish an email going to the local board secretary saying this person may or may not be approved for a survivor benefit. Please fill out the paperwork as a local board secretary and let us know what's going on. You then notify the member, we've got the paperwork, come in and sign it, and you're ready to go. Should be a very quick process for a surviving spouse, guardian, or even child benefits if they're enrolled in school. So you need to, especially if you have a request for a full-time student status. Does anybody have that? Where a student is in school, you need to keep up on that to make sure they're still in school to be receiving a benefit. That's part of the process as well. Request for a medical evaluation to continue disability. Oath of office, newly created elected members. That's on the website. You can pull it up. The template's there. You can save it to your documents. Working against the clock. Certain forms and documents have statutory requirements. Notice of action. If you've taken action, send it to our office in 20 days. Minutes are included in this time frame. The decision of the application needs to be there. It needs to be clear, concise, not general, but specific. Okay? Does that make sense? Because we get too many minutes that we read and say, Joe retired. Well, what's his effective date? How much is he getting? Whatever the situation might be as specific as possible in the minutes of the meeting. And the agendas need to be done 24 hours in advance, and we talked about the oath of office. If you have the oath of office, it protects you as a local board member.
Don,
And secretary should establish that, yes.
that 24-hour time frame that you have up there, that is at least 24 hours before, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So if our meeting started at 9, I would have had notice it 24 hours in advance yesterday about the meeting.
But you could have posted it 3 days before then.
Oh, yeah, anytime
Okay.
before 24 plus hours
Okay.
in advance, yes.
Yeah, you've mentioned the notice 24 hours or more in advance.
The agenda, yeah.
I'm a little unclear as to who's entitled to the notice. In other words, would the membership be entitled to the notice? Is the public entitled to the
public,
notice?
the
or
members,
both?
anybody that could be affected by the agenda. Most people post it on their door or their location at wherever they normally post their notices and agendas. Some are required to post it downtown with the state, so you just have to know where they're supposed to be posted and make sure it's out there.
Okay.
Make sense? Everybody posts things differently. We have to post it on our door and register with the state because we're a state agency. Fire districts might be a little different. Any questions from the webinar or from the group this time? Boy, we're doing a great job presenting this today, aren't we?
I have a question, working against the clock. For the minutes, the time frame, the turnaround time frame to have the minutes posted
Yeah.
You didn't get any?
in 3 days, 3 business days?
Normally it's 3 to 5 business days, whatever your employer requires to have
Okay.
posted. We just need the draft minutes within 20 days to make the determination for the benefits. Yeah, it's hard to get them out, but it has to be done. That's every employer, some employers have 3 to 5 day windows to
We
do.
practice
Yeah,
3,
after
but
the meeting though.
Yeah, most employers do
Oh,
3
that
days.
comes
They're
from-
little-
Yeah, most employers require 3 days of their posted on their website,
Right.
and then you send them to us within 20 days, how it works. All right, so you've got our contact information again. We just want to make sure you know who to contact, what to do. We want to thank you for attending our seminar today, and make sure you don't have any other questions from the webinar group or from this group here today. What we're going to do is go ahead and conclude this, but I'd like anybody that's in the court system to stick around. We want to talk a little about the differences between public safety and court, and give you some, feedback on how the laws have changed going forward. Does that make sense? So thank you for attending today. We're glad to have you at the webinar, and hopefully you've got something of value as you've listened to the presentation so far today. Thank you for coming.